Thanks again, Eric. So now we're going to have a mixed media presentation and then a break. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Linck-Frenz from the Comparative Literature Department here at Berkeley, who's presenting Searching for the Unenhanced Body, a Performative Decomposition. I always announce people before I actually get the technology going.
Well, I'll just start talking while you're still up here. As Eric said, this is super interdisciplinary, and so I'm going to try to talk about this in a way. I'm talking about performance studies, and so now we're going from maize to dancing, but hopefully we can all stay together in it. I'm looking at the body in relation to the socially meaningful movement that it engages in and is engaged in performance. To ask whether the body can be isolated as something separate from the sociality which it is embedded in, and whether we can distinguish between kinds of movement, specifically natural movement, performed movement, and false movement. So to start, in 1960, Yvonne Rainer initiated a tradition of experimental postmodern dance by redefining the body as actual weight, mass, and unenhanced physicality, and declared that the body remained the enduring reality. 50 years later, the Belgian choreographer Anne de Keersmaker wrote, "When we dance, we use, in a very natural way, the mechanics of our body and of all of our senses to express joy, sadness, and the things which we care about." These two statements live within a very similar conception of the body that appears throughout the postmodern choreographic project. It speaks of stripping the body of its social falsity, returning to the original, the instinctive, the mechanical elements of the body, and all of these notions are steeped in the idea that they are naturally produced, that when we strip the body of all of its social connotations, when I stop making this gesture and stop using all of these social ideas that we all understand, I can somehow arrive at a body that is disconnected from all of its social relations and material relations. I personally would like to challenge this conception of the unenhanced body on multiple levels. First, by thinking about how the bodies that are being choreographed within Anne de Keersmaker's work in particular has been constituted by the material, semantic, and social realities in which the bodies are embedded. And secondly, and this is, I think, a little bit more relevant to the topic of this symposium, Science and Society, I think it's important to examine the venue within which these performances themselves are situated. The social site through which so much of Anne de Keersmaker's work has recently been made visible to the public, which is YouTube. She has begun choreographing advertisements for YouTube. Anne de Keersmaker is a super well-known Belgian choreographer who's generally thought of as very experimental and always deconstructing social norms. So much of her choreography draws on the gestural language of the body in order to express what cannot be said in words. Those are her words. But this use of gesture, to me, already brings into question the very idea of the unenhanced body. Because the gesture presented in the movement isn't a universal that emerges naturally from the mechanical structure of the body, but it's habituated through the circumstances in which it exists. When I go like this, it has a certain meaning because we all have that understanding of this meaning me, maybe trying to explain it to you. So in considering this, I want to think about how the physical dimensions of the body, the physical dimensions of the movement of the body, are all altered by the matter that we ingest, navigate, talk to and through, entertain ourselves with, and attempt to encapsulate ourselves within. I think of this especially in relation to what John Nacarado was talking about earlier today about this gesture and how we've started to adapt our own gestural figures around the material that we're constantly moving and using. And it's literally changing our own material relation to our physical reality. So this initial challenge to the unenhanced body is not particularly new or exciting, but I think it becomes exceedingly more complex when it is layered within the frame provided by YouTube. If the body cannot be disentangled from all of the intricate material and technological matter that constitutes our everyday experience, neither can the performance of the body. So since the late 2000s, YouTube has become one of the principal loci for archiving choreographic work of a lot of different choreographers, but particularly Anne de Keersmaker. You can find almost all of her work on YouTube. And I would say that we can't just think of this as YouTube housing or storing the work, because it actually purposefully creates a very particular frame that inundates the viewer in multiple different spheres simultaneously. The viewer is prompted with videos recommended for you, forced to watch the first 4 seconds of advertisements, and sometimes even drawn in to watch their entirety. Presented with the archives of rabid and contentious comments below the video, and then at the end of the performance, again we are prompted with more videos that we might continue to watch that sometimes are completely unrelated to what we've just watched. There are a few videos in Andy Kiersmaker's work that demonstrates the way in which the storm of seemingly random images can function to break down the boundaries perceived between kinds of bodies, kinds of art, and kinds of viewers. For instance, in her 1983 work, Achterland, which was actually made for video, which is a whole other concept that I think is important to consider, what happens when you transpose physical movement from a space into a two-dimensional sphere on the screen, and how that changes our experience of it. But in this 1983 work, all of the advertisements and videos that are prompted and all of the comments for this video are actually in relation to Beyonce Knowles and not to Andy Kiersmaker. And although this seems really odd at first, it's actually because in 2011, Beyonce Knowles was accused of lifting portions of choreography for her Countdown music video from Rosas Dans Rosas, which is a piece, one of the first pieces by Andy Kiersmaker. She made it when she was in college. The comments below the video read, "I played violin, and I know how hard it is to perform this piece. But with that aside, the dancing, which I know nothing about, fits to the music. Good job. Still, I like Beyonce's rendition. It's modern, meaning this was way ahead of its time. Shout out to the innovator. Jazz, tap, ballet always look like, what? To people who don't get the movements." So to me, this is funny, first of all. I laughed a lot when I first read it. But also it sort of prompts us, all of this figuration and framing of this experimental dance within these popular and commercial these other choreographies that are commercial or popular, sort of makes us ask how Andy Kiersmaker is really socially deconstructing the body, because we are literally submerged in advertisements that are actively constructing the body and actively constructing how we move as we watch Andy Kiersmaker. So the frame around the video in YouTube creates a collision of types of audiences. We might think, who would watch Beyonce? Who would watch Andy Kiersmaker? What kinds of aesthetics are they both leaning towards? What kinds of movement are they both leaning towards? What kind of body are they constructing? And so on YouTube, I would argue that the distinction between the sphere of art that is supposedly deconstructing the body, returning to its unenhanced, original, and authentic beginning, this sphere is collapsed onto the popular and commercial sphere, where the social body, the performed body, the false body, the enhanced body is constructed. The collision and collapse of these two asks us to look more critically at the very idea of an unenhanced body. So that is the end of my more lecture type part of my presentation. I now have a really fairly short piece. Keep in mind, I think that for people who don't watch very much dance, there's this sense that you go into it feeling like I won't understand this. But I'm exactly kind of trying to question that idea about experimental dance. And so the main things that I would pay attention to are gesture and how you experience this, and the difference is between experiencing something in video and experiencing something in live space. And then also maybe try to imagine what this would look like within a YouTube frame where there's like 5 different things going on the side, and maybe also like a little commercial waiting for you to finish watching. Also, one note is that all of the video from this is actually from Andy Kiersmaker's work. Not working?
It'll work.
If it doesn't, it would be funny.
No, it will. It's in here somewhere. Now you're going to get to see what systems iTunes looks like. Please go. See it there like a million times.
When you work with geometry and with geometrical patterns, what you actually do is like sort of measuring the earth. It becomes very much about relationships of the amount of space you occupy in a certain amount of time. Precision becomes very crucial. With the sand, it's not easy to be precise, to hit the spots exactly.
Shape and the look of the front end. I really like the interior materials, like the grain of like the leather and the dash seem very upscale.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'5".
And how is your leg back there?
It's excellent actually. There's a lot of leg room over here.
So it's a very articulated space, very articulated geometry that is drawn out very carefully.
And now we're gonna have a little break. So stretch, play, and